Did you know that Erie was once the capital of the nation for 10 days? Let's take a look on Project Algerine.
If you were wondering where my family is from, they're from Erie. And if you were wondering what our slogan is, we love Erie. And if you were wondering where our fair city is, it's by the lake. And if you were wondering what our famous catchphrase is, we love Erie.
For 10 incredible days in American history, the power of the U.S. government wasn't in Washington, D.C. Nope, it was all running out of a private home in a small port city on the Great Lakes. This is the amazing and mostly forgotten story of how a national crisis turned Erie, Pennsylvania into the temporary capital of the United States.
So let me start by asking you a question that seems, super simple. Where is the capital of the United States? And yeah, of course, the obvious answer is Washington, D.C. But that wasn't always the case. And for one brief, really scary period in the 19th century, the answer was very, very different. Because in late August of 1849, the capital of the United States was a sick room. In Erie, Pennsylvania, that's where the president was lying, possibly on his deathbed, and where the entire machinery of the federal government had to grind to a halt and relocate. So how on earth did this happen?
Well, it all kicked off with a sudden, violent illness. This was a medical emergency that didn't just put one man's life on the line. It threatened to bring the entire nation to a standstill.
The official diagnosis was something called cholera morbus. Now, this wasn't exactly the same as the big cholera pandemic that was raging at the time, but honestly, the symptoms were just as terrifying. It was this absolutely brutal infection that could literally drain the life out of you in just a few days.
And that is precisely what happened to President Zachary Taylor. He's visiting Erie and he just completely collapses. The illness hit him so hard that his own doctors genuinely thought he was a goner. The president was totally incapacitated, and with him, the entire executive branch of the government was just paralyzed, hundreds of miles away from Washington.
Okay, so what was the president even doing in Erie in the first place? I mean, why was he traveling at all, especially during one of the deadliest pandemics of the entire 19th century? Well, the answer really lies in just how fragile the country itself was at that moment.
Taylor, a career soldier they called Old Rough and Ready, was on this really high-stakes tour of the Northeast. See, the nation was being ripped apart by this huge debate over whether slavery should be allowed in the new territories we just won. This tour was his big gamble to try and personally appeal for unity. But just look at the context here. He's doing this in the middle of a massive cholera outbreak, and on top of that, Taylor was 64 and already weakened from past illnesses. He was, quite literally, risking his life for this. And this timeline just shows you how fast it all went wrong. He leaves DC feeling fine, but only 2 days later the first signs of trouble start. He rallies for a bit, but then this crushing fatigue sets in until finally he gets to Erie and completely breaks down. By the time he's even seen in public again weeks later, people said he looked absolutely haggard. The tour had just wrecked him. So, with the president on the verge of death, his staff is scrambling to find top-notch medical care right now. And as luck would have it, this small port town on Lake Erie had a kind of secret weapon, a federal asset that would turn out to be the key to the president's survival. And this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. Erie was the home port for the USS Michigan, which was the Navy's very first iron-hulled warship, a real symbol of American tech power. And because it was based there, Erie had this incredibly deep connection to the federal government. The officers on that ship weren't just visitors, they were a core part of the city's community.
And I just love this quote. It illustrates it perfectly. The city was actually known as the mother-in-law of the Navy because so many sailors and officers ended up marrying local women. These weren't just business relationships. These were real, personal family ties. And that personal connection was about to save the president. Because when President Taylor collapsed, the man they called for was the USS Michigan ship surgeon, a guy named Dr. William Maxwell Wood. And in what has to be one of the most incredible coincidences in American history, Dr. Wood wasn't just one of the Navy's best doctors. His wife, Rose, was President Taylor's niece.
The one person in the whole region who could maybe save him was family. So, for the next 6 critical days, President Taylor is treated in Dr. Wood's private home. Now you gotta remember, back then, the seat of government was pretty much just wherever the president happened to be. He had to sign stuff. And as you can see here, official documents, like papers for ships heading out to the California Gold Rush, were actually rerouted from Washington to this little house in Erie so he could sign them from his sickbed. For about 10 days, a bedroom in Erie, Pennsylvania was the administrative heart of the entire country. Taylor survived the ordeal in Erie, thanks to Dr. Wood. But what makes this whole episode so eerie is that it was almost a perfect dress rehearsal for the tragedy that would end up taking his life less than a year later. The parallels are just uncanny. I mean, look at this table. It's almost the exact same playbook. In both cases, you've got intense summer heat. The trigger is something he ate or drank. The symptoms are nearly identical. The diagnosis is the exact same, cholera morbus. But the outcome, that's where the story changes. His survival in Erie just makes his death in DC 10 months later feel even more tragic. And to really get what he went through, you have to look at the medicine they were using. They called it heroic medicine, and believe me, it was brutal. They were giving him stuff like mercury chloride to violently purge his system, then quinine for the fever and opium for the insane cramps. The fact that his body actually survived this onslaught of treatment in Erie is just a testament to how tough he really was. Now, of course, because of his sudden death and his strong stance against expanding slavery, the conspiracy theories started flying. Rumors of assassination by poison went on for more than 100 years. I mean, pro-slavery radicals had plenty of reasons to want him out of the picture. The theory got so big that in 1991, they actually exhumed his body to test it, and the result? Nothing. No foul play. Science confirmed he died of natural causes. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? What does this wild, forgotten story about the 10-day capital in Erie, Pennsylvania really tell us about America?
It tells us that in 1849, the stability of the entire U.S. government, a nation that was stretching to a new coast and about to rip itself apart in a civil war, it all rested on the health of just one person.
I mean, think about that. The crisis in Erie shows us a time when the U.S. government was so small and the presidency was so personal that a simple case of food poisoning could literally move the capital city. The whole executive branch was that vulnerable, depending on stagecoaches and steamboats and the pure chance that a good doctor who happened to be your nephew-in-law was nearby.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating what-if to think about. If President Taylor had died in Erie 10 months earlier than he actually did, the entire timeline leading up to the Civil War could have been completely different. It really makes you wonder, right? How might American history have changed if the fate of the nation hadn't come down to one doctor and one family connection in one small house in Erie, Pennsylvania?